I was just checking, it's good afternoon, no longer good morning. Wanted to make sure that I'm saying it right. So this is an interesting panel, and I believe that we have been asked to introduce ourselves in short couple of sentences. Okay, you need both? All right, excellent. All right, my name is Jayant Kumar, and I'm Senior Director at General Electric. I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area, United States. And the background is that academically I have a PhD in electrical power systems with PhD minor in computer science and economics. I have been to different utilities in my past life. So I worked for Pacific Gas and Electric, much more talked about utility these days. If you are familiar with and tuned with the news, the company is in bankruptcy discussion these days. And so it's very interesting to really look at that, how the California state's largest utility can get into bankruptcy. Again, that has got nothing to do with my background. I worked with them almost 20 years ago. I did have background working with a number of technology companies, and I would say that a little bit with ABB, Alstom, now General Electric. And if I go back, quick narration of my last 15 years, I would say that when I got out of the school in the early 90s, it was a deregulation area. And again, there is a difference between privatization and deregulation, so keep that in mind. So privatization, and the reason why I'm trying to make the distinction, this particular panel is about private sector participation in power distribution operation. So that's more focused on the private component and element of it. So what I was about to say that beginning in the early 90s, the deregulation started worldwide, and the very first Energy Policy Act that really paved the path in the country of United States was National Energy Policy Act of '92, which you can somewhat compare to 2003 Act that you have in India. So if you really want to do a parallel. And so I was fresh out of school, so I was given the responsibility for creating a market engine so that the markets can take the bids and clear and have the schedule and dispatch to all the different participants. So that's what my career starting point was. So I started with New York Power Pool, converting to New York ISO, then California ISO. Then followed by that, I would say there was an issue in terms of the financial discipline in the utility industry. If those of you, if you are familiar and you are aware of, or if you can recollect, there was a big bankruptcy series, it's starting with Enron bankruptcy back in 2001 areas. So at that point of time, actually I was asked to look into some of the financial solutions that the energy industry should be looking at. So starting from the risk simulation to the transaction management to the settlement. So I kind of went into that area for some time. And then late 2000s, like 2007, 2008, I would say, or mid-2000s, smart metering started, and which is what Pravir was talking about and very beautifully summarized. And that was a great education for me, Pravir. Thank you. And I was expecting 250 million numbers of meters because it is comparable to China's southern grid, which is roughly 300 million meters. So that's the only comparison that you can do, because then yet another state grid, China, is even notch higher. But point well taken. So I was responsible for the smart grid activity actually at Alstom at that time. And I must distinguish between the smart metering and the smart grid. And these are all relevant discussion in the context of what we are talking when we are saying what do we mean by private sector participation in power distribution operation. So the smart grid sort of started with the smart metering. And if you really look at why that started in the United States, basically the distribution companies had tough time in managing the distribution cost. And that was the biggest issue up at the state utility commissions. And again, the way the country in the United States we are organized, all the distribution activities are handled by state utility commissions. So that doesn't come at the transmission level or a federal jurisdiction. And so each state utility commission had to go through its own round. So it was not one single slate. across the country. So that's an important thing that I would like to mention. It's again started with California, and California always sets the first wave. And basically, it was those days when people had to look into that, what's the real value stream of a smart meter? And again, I would really like to highlight one more time what Praveer started with. When you go back and look at what people were claiming in 2006 and 2007, that what's the business case of a smart meter? You will get plethora of reasons starting from, oh, not only it's going to take care of the meter to bill, which is the key focus, but it will be a parallel for the distribution automation. We will do the automated demand response. We are going to be doing a complete, a different level of automation infrastructure, which will build the entire distributed energy resource solution, and on and on and on. But what happened actually? That itself is a good case study, and I would really like to submit that for your consideration. Yeah, 2 more minutes. Okay. So that's the perspective I just wanted to share with you, that what it means when you really talk about the smart metering and the smart grid movement, and I was just sharing with you what happened in the country, in the United States. So having said that, coming back to the core topic of the private sector participation in the power distribution operation, everything that I said is where the private sector should be participating. And what I mean by that is, what's the business case? And often what happens is the business case is done in the isolation from the entities who will be participating not only in the capital project, but will be taking the ownership of the operations. And as it was highlighted, that system operation is the key, but more importantly, system operation is built on the system integration, which is the foundation. And so when you really talk about the private sector participation, I would say a typical overall life cycle of the power distribution operation, starting from your pre-procurement process, which really gets into an early blueprinting, the business case and requirement, I would say that's where the biggest participation should be. And typically what happens is that the people wait, and then the RFP comes, and then it gets responded. I don't think that's going to work. And that's exactly what has happened in any part of the world. So the problem that you're facing, that the SCADA is only one common thing that you can play games. The problem is, in the similar fashion, a different level of manifestation at different places. But the fact is, those assets are not designed to be fully utilized in many cases, and not being operated in the framework because that never existed, or were ignored with the physical realities or the practical implementation challenges. And those are the things I would say that the private sector should bring with the experience to start the right footing to begin with. So I'll finish it at that.
Thank you. Thank you.